which is EAM, CMMS, and then which is Confirm, EAM, and then we also got Sensei, AI, which is more for prescriptive maintenance software. Then we have the strategic one. Everybody's talking about asset investment planning and whole life cost modeling. So we also got that product, again, which is in the Brightly toolkit. And then, which is Predictor and Works Planner. And then we have the tactical one, which is unifying the workflow, unifying the systems, which is a low-code platform. Because manager don't want to see the same thing as the inspector. Inspector doesn't want to see the same thing as the operational manager. They're all different. So that's what we thought tactically that could work. So that's the experience, that's the platform that we got, and we got a booth actually in C5. Please have a look. And Richard actually got a product demo that he, if you're interested, he can show that to you. But it's more about, from the two leaders, David and John, to talk about their transformation journey in different ways. So I'll let David to start with your introduction, and then maybe John.
Thank you, Sian. I'm the National Asset Manager at Fulton Hogan. I suppose I look around and at what people are here, and I often get phone calls from people wanting to know how I manage our assets. And I don't manage our assets at all, I manage client assets. So Fulton Hogan's a civil construction organisation. So to give you an idea what we might be doing, if there's an intersection being improved down there, that'll be us. If someone's replacing that sign, that'll be us too. Or whether we're doing something with the water utilities. So we're working across all that space. So I work within our business on how we use asset management and associated technology like GIS and other things, how we can improve operations in our business. And as we go through this, I'll talk a bit about how we've attempted to use asset management, other technology, and the journey we're on.
Thanks, guys. I started my career, fortunately, with IBM in Federal Systems Division in the US. And I was trained in the skills of systems integration and then worked on military-type implementations in the US. And then it was extremely beneficial because IBM decided to move the capability into the private sector and commercially moved systems integration into the commercial and business sides of IBM. And I led that initiative in Southeast Asia, first for IBM and then for my own company, Saratoga. We've been doing this for quite some time. And the initiative and the innovation that occurs now is like nothing that we've seen before. Digitisation fueled by AI, ML on low code is something which has reduced the costs of implementations by 80%. Timeframes, cost are just reduced enormously. The quality of data has improved X-fold, and the availability of information from that data is now enabling business decisions to come out in a much more functional and much more structured manner. For me, it's gold. Being a systems integrator, it's gold. I had a piece of work a little while ago with John Holland where we were asked to put a whole new business unit together, and I was asked to evaluate the market, which I went through in extreme detail, and we came out with a couple of products. One was a competitor to Siemens, which was an IBM product, but we also came out with Mendex, and they, as far as the low-code platforms was concerned, was a long way in front of the rest. So what I want to do here today and through our session downstairs is to share with you my experiences and the benefits that came with utilising, say, a COTS commercially out-of-the-box type application, integrating with legacy systems, moving legacy systems from within the organisation onto the platform of Mendex, and then using Mendex to tailor everything for the front end so that we had a customer-centred. Our fundamental was customer-centred is where we come from. Anyone who dealt or interfaced with that system was a customer. Don't care if they were a supplier. Don't care if they were an employee. Don't care if they were a customer or a contractor. Everyone was to be treated the same way. And we put that front end in using Mendex so that everybody interfaced online, offline, through digitisation structures. We took the data out of the centralised systems and put them into a point-to-point system data structure in Mendex, and then accessed it through turning it into information for how it was presented throughout every one of the organisations we dealt with in the way in which they needed it, and kept the rest of the info away from them. So I'll turn it over to you. That's a longer introduction than was planned. But
It was.
you'll find that
session.
happens from me. So I'd be really glad to share the experiences with you, and really glad to talk about how we go about those things and how we've actually used Mendex and Siemens in going forward with these projects, and how we go about it to make sure we don't fail.
Thank you, John. I've been involved with transformation all my life. As I mentioned, this is country number 6. Every organization you go, either digital transformation, business transformation, some sort of transformation, right? And one of the company, and especially when you're working for a tech company, transformation is part of your life. Everyday transformation is actually Siemens logo. Imagine that. And the point there is I've worked on a group level implementation in my previous life. Our parent company did that transformation over 20 years. Can you imagine? Then what they thought is they were good, they were experienced, they had their A team, and they want to do that for the subsidiary level. And I just saw last week, one of the transformation we started in Hungary has been just deployed, year 15. So, and group CTO lost her job. It took long. So I'm really curious from your perspective, John, what are the must-haves to actually deliver something meaningful this long in the evolving programs? And how do you define success without losing your job?
So I've never lost my job. That's not true. I've been fired lots of times because people quite often don't agree with me. But that's okay. That's fine, especially Shine. So anyway, basically, aligning to the business objective is fundamental. So my view of where we go with digitisation is that it's a way of doing business, and therefore it needs to start absolutely with the business structuring and the goals and the objectives and the measures, the tangible measures that come out of running a digitisation application and system into your company, because it does change the way you do business. It affects the way in which you deal with customers. It affects the productivity within your organisation. It affects the agility of the organisation, and it drives through with all of the types of things we look for in how you can stage your deliveries over time, that the organisation can accept that change without it destroying the organisation. So Shine, my view is that the fundamental is align with your business and use your technology to enable the business.
Thank you. David, challenging part, going digital, especially when you're a contractor, I would say, from my previous life again, because you are doers, and it's more of boots on the ground. But when it comes to technology, we tend to lose with IT projects always. I'm really curious from you that where are you in Fulton, Hogan, in your digital transformation journey? I'm sure you got one, and what are the roadblockers?
Thanks, Shine. We're somewhere in the middle, but going back to, is this an IT project? I heard recently, from senior people in the organisation, they're like, well, that's an IT project. Why isn't IT doing this? And I suppose we're in the middle, but we're going at different paces in different areas. Across the whole business, we're just embarking on a digital transformation. So there is actually the support across the whole business now. Where Shine talked about a couple of years, and John sort of alluded that this is a journey, and I agree with that, with a mindset of continuous improvement, then your digitisation never ends. You just find a way to do it better as you go. So the other area where I look at is asset management. We've been going much faster. But again, some of the challenges around getting our business on board. I've, for a while, run, the businesses, as Shine's saying, very much doers. We make money from doing work. We don't make money from being digital. So it's interesting. I found it interesting this morning, we're talking about AI, and I can imagine that when you're in an office. Everybody's in an office. We can all use AI. When you're out there changing the sign on the side of the road, and there's other things, and today at least it's not raining, there's a whole lot of other challenges you've got going on. But certainly in my team, we've often had to try and lead the business, which then has some other challenges. I'm sure we'll touch on some of that. And one of the things I did a couple of years ago around using the data we have in an asset management system is how do we move from just reporting a KPI to actually managing that KPI. So we had a performance measure around the availability of traffic signals. And we could sit there at the end of the month and go, how'd we go? Maybe not so good. But if we actually looking at that regularly and actually changing our behaviour and looking at what we can do in a more timely manner, we can get some better outcomes. But certainly we're somewhere in the middle. I don't see an end. I think I'll retire before that.
It's funny, actually. I remember in my early days, I was putting management systems in place, and we had a street cleansing operation. And we asked those guys to capture something because all their work was empty bins. We wanted to be efficient, and we asked them, whilst you're emptying the bins, can you please collect the asset condition for us? And they just said, give us something. We don't want tablet, we don't want anything, just give us something. We gave them a paper. And when the paper come back, it was all messed up with dirts and wets and all the rest. We thought we were doing a good job. But when we looked at it, we said, this is not an option, we can't do that. And actually guys called me on site to say, Shine, come with us, have a look, the challenges. And I felt like, holy hell, what we are asking these guys to do is impossible. And then we just said, okay, we are going through the digital journey, let's give them a tablet. And again, it wasn't a tablet actually, it was a really small BlackBerry, and they had to work on this, and company said, this is the way. And I never forget the supervisor, and that was never a forgotten experience for me. He just said, Shine, do you see my finger? I said, yes. Look at this tablet, or look at this phone, and you want me to press this, and look at this. And I felt that at that moment. Sometimes we all put digital solutions, sophisticated solutions. We forget the actual value and the people. And this is, I don't think this is a transformation. This is an education. That's why I was talking to a few, and the point there was, we want to put AI, we want to put digital, and the workforce is leaving. It's a good thing. I really want you to think about this. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Are we losing the knowledge? Or are we really purely relying on AI just to automate the way we work? And again, just on this discussion, I really want you to walk away with one thing from today to say, yes, this resonated me the most. And I'm going to ask someone in the audience what that one thing resonated to you the most. So John, I'll ask more like delivery and operation. And probably that question was maybe to David, but it's about, we always hear that construction projects and asset management projects, when you actually build and maintain in the long-term projects, alliance projects and PPP, it's always the challenge. The BIM model is submitted by the contractor to the asset manager, so you're building something, and then asset manager have to operate the asset for the next 30 years. And I never forget the Crossrail team was telling me, we got bloody just water valve. When you actually look at the design drawings, you got 70 data points. When I'm maintaining, I need only 1 or 2 parameters. How do you determine what parameters are relevant to maintenance? So I got a question from this to you, David, because you work with PPPs and long-term projects. From your experience, how do you really align the delivery and operations and the client? And how do you get the ownership from the client? Because it's always, not, I wouldn't say political, but it's very specific agenda by the contributor to this long-term asset management contracts. So what do you think is the long falls there?
Well, it's amazing. I suppose looking around the room, and sometimes I think people owning their own assets and managing them. The last session just talked about how they'd outsourced and then brought things back in-house. I have worked on the client. I think it's very much client-led. I work in civil space, certainly not the major construction, but you look at what happens. Someone goes, there's an owner. They say what they want. Often these days there's a lot of consultants actually deciding what that is. Someone goes and constructs it. We've been involved in motorways where, as an asset manager, you're supposed to be in there helping the client make decisions, good asset management decisions, and the contractor's got all the power. So the contractor wants to put the cheapest equipment in, and whatever parts the defects liability. And so I really think the clients have really got to be a bit stronger. And there's probably some technical aspects around that clients, once you outsource everything, you really don't know what you're buying. So if you don't know that, then it's pretty difficult too. But I think certainly leadership's really key in that one.
Thank you. And John, we are generally focusing on transport, but you worked on different sectors. So I'm quite curious in terms of the contractual models and allowance, the influence, the operational performance and the whole of life outcomes. How do you see this in different industry?
The issues are the same across all industries. Anything that's tower-based finishes up being delivered tower-based. And so the issue with that is how do you pull the towers together? And honestly, doing that with a railway line and mobile transport on that line is quite a feat. It's no different to doing it in a power station. It's no different to distribution lines. Those contracts have to be brought together in a way which preserves and drives a holistic approach to the delivery, and you have to be smart enough to be able to hold people accountable. So the way in which we go about that is we have 4 pillars that support a digitisation base. Those 4 pillars are business, data, people and technology. And each one of those we bring together from a contractual perspective across the entire delivery to make sure that everyone's in sync. And there's a huge amount of detail that goes into driving out operational value chain models, and all of the linking systems, applications and delivery organisations sit behind that, driving out the process models that sit underneath it. For instance, the last contract I did, there was something like 4,000 process models that ran under the top line model to bring the entire organisation together. So the answer is detail, detail, detail. And the other side of that is people, people, people. So if you haven't got the governance, you haven't got the administration, you haven't got the management over the top of it, you haven't got the KPIs to drive it, and you don't have visibility, then you've got problems. So again, I'll come back to the fundamental pillars for driving out the platform. Business, data, people and technology.
Okay, I take this one. Because I come from civil engineering background, I always had this debate with the people to say civil is different than mechanical and electrical. It's always the case. One relies on reliability and production, the other one, how do you get the failure? Because one of the directors from National Highways used to tell me, how can I determine my failure rate on my roads? They want to have the pothole criticality or whatever, because service doesn't stop. So I'm quite curious from you, David, in terms of different type of assets. How do you see the reliability and prediction? But also one thing resonated to me. A friend used to work for a toll operator. His drive was keeping the network open all the time because it's revenue. They need to make sure road is not closed. Now he works for a government authority, and his point is, it doesn't matter. I can access from anywhere because he's not in the toll operation anymore. So doesn't matter. So I'm just trying to understand from the taxpayer's perspective, from the legacy perspective, how do you see where you sit in the organization that the operation model should change or not? You should still focus on not closing the road or accessibility part of the asset maintenance, but also from the different type of asset perspective. Do we really need to change the way we deliver and manage assets because of your organization or because of different asset types?
Thanks, Shine. I suppose in civil and particularly roads, we've very much managed assets through inspections, and when it breaks, we fix it. So coming to a conference like this, talking about reliability-centric maintenance, is a bit different. But certainly in roads, in the M&E space, then that's much more where it is at. Should we change it? On some aspects, yes, but I was talking to a university a couple of years ago, and they wanted to get some funding for research around potholes. I live in New South Wales, so a couple of years ago we had record rainfalls, potholes everywhere, and he said, "Oh, we want funding for pothole determination model." I'm like, not very helpful, because when does potholes turn up? Well, there's a lot of other things happen before the potholes. but I suppose that's a bit of a mindset around what it's like in civil. I said, well, if we can pick out when's the vulnerability in the pavement, then we'll have a much better idea of what we're doing. And we can certainly use data for that. In the civil space, we've done predictive modelling around pavements for decades. We've had contract models going back almost 30 years ago where you got one chance to put a number in for the next 10 years for maintaining a road network. Huge transfer of risk through that. But there's certainly plenty of learnings from M&E and other industries that we could bring to civil to do it better. On the accessibility, I was very surprised when Sean was telling me someone's like, I'm now a client, I don't worry about that so much. Certainly in toll operations, it's very important. We do work, something simple as a resurfacing, and we're all part of the community, and sometimes the restrictions on actually doing something for maintenance is unbelievable. We had a small project resurfacing an intersection, and it went up from $600,000 to $1 million just so people could have between 10 and 12 p.m. They didn't have any restrictions, which, and some of my frustration working more in that maintenance space, if we're doing a construction project, you could affect that for the next 2 years and no one worries. So certainly plenty to learn, but there's probably best of both aspects.
Thank you. John, one thing I often see in digital programs is organization lose sight of the business outcomes. Too much pressure, and then they are trying to achieve, and at the end of it becomes like a for the tech's sake part. Because you're also trying to get the knowledge of multiple layers to come up with the tangible outcome. And generally the guys on the ground, they don't buy in, because when you have massive systems, you need to do customization and configuration. And when it's too big, need to name those, but I work with some of those, and they are really good systems, but they need people input. They need operator input to customize those. So could you share from your perspective, how do you make sure that the product actually fit for purpose and the people on the ground, all different players, gets the tangible outcome? And how Mendix did help from your last project, actually?
That's a big question. And I could spend the entire day talking to all of you about the ramifications of that type of question, right? In short, it is very much driven by understanding what your business wants to do, fundamental, and driving it by outcomes, step one. Then the technology must support it. And I come back again to saying there are 4 pillars to the platform: business, data, people, and technology. They can all be delivered concurrently, but you have to know how they depend on one another. If you miss a dependency, you're going to regress the piece of work if you're doing a transition. Fundamentally, where we are is transitioning at the moment because there's so much chat about digital, so much chat about AI. The types of things that David talks about, we've actually been doing for years. It's a lot smarter and faster using digital. How did we use Mendix? It was the glue, and that's what we were looking for. I don't know how many systems. One project I ran had 169 systems underneath it to bring together into a single delivery, right? That's 160 different vendors, right? It's huge. Bringing it together with Mendix was a huge advantage, and I looked at all of the other engines, low-code engines, and there's good ones, and some of them suit specific purpose. But the Mendix one was the one that we settled on and the one we used. And it actually provided the glue. It enabled us to use all of the information from those bottom systems, from those fundamental COT systems and legacy systems, and then to bring those together in a data model, and then to use the info from the data model to structure that up to what each one of the people who were servicing the asset needed. So it was very individually focused to each of the groups that were driving the particular asset structure. You've got someone out on a railway line 1 million miles from anywhere, no connectivity. You've got to have something which operates on its standalone. You've got to have an interface back when you get back into the into the where you can get back onto Wi-Fi again. But then you've got to schedule it so people know what they're doing when they're out there. When they're out there, they find there's additional problems with the asset. You've got to be able to trap that. You've got to raise extra work orders. If work's not completed, you have to be able to reschedule it and complete the work that's been done. All of that we did through Mendex, the whole front end. The UI, UX, customer engagement was all a Mendex-driven structure using fundamental applications, legacy applications were already in the system. There's a lot of things I could talk to you about why I think it's an advantage. One of the things is it preserves the investment in your underlying assets because you continue to use them while you're structuring all of the front end in digitisation structures to be able to suit the way your business operates. That was probably the biggest advantage of it. It's not expensive, and on top of that, you own the IP. So a big piece in the selection of Mendex was that it was owned by Siemens, so we wanted someone that could be there for umpteen years. And then on top of that, we wanted something that we could tailor specifically for whoever was using it, be it client, be it staff, being whoever. And then we wanted to own the IP. And this to me is really important. If you tailor things in Mendex, the company owns the IP. And so it's competitive. And the job that I was given last time, one of the major key performance indicators or changes for that business was to be competitive. It needed to be a differentiator, and it needed to be a highly productive system, and it needed to be agile, and it needed to be transferable. And that was fundamentally the goals that the organisation gave us, and we put all of the structuring that went underneath that. I've mentioned the fact we got down to something like 4,000 second-level process flows to be able to support that, where we identified the data points, identified decision points, so we don't lose that from the organisation. We take that into the new structure with us, don't lose any of that. So the job is extensive, but it's been done umpteen times before. So all the models are there, the structures are there, it's a matter of applying them.
So in that, John, because one of the challenges in our business, and we're here talking about asset management, so we're talking about often CMMSs or asset management systems. But then organisations like ours say, well, how's that linking to our other systems? How's that linking to our finance system or our quality system, or, we run a separate HR system as well. So how do we actually bring any of that together to make more sense of their data? Is Mendex suitable for that?
So we're going to come at this from a diverse direction. Most important thing is establishing your value chains. So the value chain in the asset management system, which we defined in detail for each different business unit we put that into. And then we rolled up the supporting processes that go in that asset management chain, like HR, like risk, like all the safety systems that you've got to have in place, finance, customer relationship management, all of those components were all defined. Context diagram was structured after that, where all the interfaces to all those systems were defined in business terms, and that rolled down to the process flows that we need to pull together for the entire delivery. In those process flows, we identified the data points and the decision points that had to be retained, and then programmed the front end in Mendex.
Yes, yes, I'll just wrap it up. I was checking the time. Yes, I was going to leave the floor for discussion, but maybe just one point that if anybody wants to share one thing that they take up from this session, anybody would like to volunteer? Yeah?
I was meant to have a question, but I think we ran out of the time there. But I think at the heart of digital transformation is the inherent question of who owns the data.
Who owns the data?
Who owns the data, right? I mean, in our experience, we've always got this as a bit of a battleground. Data ownership contractual versus the actual user data. And I think, John, you would have come across a lot of that challenge in dealing with client organizations where they tend to sway in a different way, and you're saying, well, we know we're the industry leader in a certain niche, and we know it much better. And that's always an interesting, I think, ground for us to play in.
So I've got a really black and white answer for you. Every contract that I go into and I set up, the client owns the data. The client owns the metadata, and the client owns the structure of the data. So when you're bringing that together into a data model, you must own all of those components. Now, when you're dealing with large organisations, they will argue that our process flows support our data model, right? And I go, but you're modifying that for the client, end of story. That's where your contract stops, and you move it across to the client, and the client owns that data model. And again, I'll drive that out to the nth degree, because that then allows us to set up the process flows and the workflows in any way we like, and make sure that there's a separation between the vendor and the client. Done it every contract I've ever done. Okay.
I suggest that if you have any questions, we are actually in downstairs in Siemens booth. There were so many things that we wanted to cover, but time is very limited. But if you want to actually see the product demo, we got a product demo session downstairs. Richard is going to talk about from the mechanical assets perspective that what we did talk here. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, please do.